Hi guys, and I'm back with another story. Let me see if I can move this camera up just a little bit. There you go. So today I'm doing someone who has always been one of my all-time favorites because she and I share the same birthday, and that is Marilyn Monroe. Her birthday is June 1st, 1926. She was born in Los Angeles, California. Um, I loved Marilyn Monroe all the time. I still have pictures of her in my room, and people always gave me little trinkets and gifts of her. So I really loved her vulnerability, I guess, but also the fact that she was really smart. So let's talk a little bit about Marilyn today. So Marilyn was born, of course, in June 1st, 1926 in Los Angeles, California. She didn't know who her father was, but I believe it was her mother that made her believe that it was Clark Gable, which it never actually was. Her mother was not mentally stable. Although her mother had worked at the studios, she was slicing film, clips and putting them together at the studio. But she wasn't mentally healthy. She ended up putting Marilyn into a foster home. And so Marilyn lived with several different foster families, just looking for that stability that she couldn't seem to find. Finally, when Marilyn got to be about 16 years old, the people that she was staying with, who had taken care of her for quite some time, said that they knew a neighbor down the street with a young guy about her age, and that she should marry him, and that way this particular family that she was staying with, they could go ahead and they could leave California, which was their plan, and they could be sure that Marilyn would be safe and not going back into the foster home, because they felt that Marilyn was too old for that, which she really was. So she did marry the guy down the street. I think his name was Jim Doherty, and they married for a while. Jim went off to the war. Marilyn stayed home, and she ended up having to go to work, as many people had to during that time. Many women had to leave the house and go to work, and so that's what she did. And while she was at work, she would get a lot of attention, and they would have people coming in taking pictures of women that were working, and she was a pretty girl, and they were taking her picture. So the guys, the different photographers, told her, hey, you could make money doing this. And so she ended up not working in the factory, which is where she was working in California, but she started doing photography shots for different magazines. As time went on, they told her, different photographers, you could make a lot of money if you do glamour girl shots. So that's what she did. She did glamour girl shots, and for different magazine covers or different magazine spreads. And ultimately, Howard Hughes saw her. And he was just, oh my goodness. And he was a producer at that time, but he was trying to help her get with the studio. And he talked to some people, and he helped her get with 20th Century Fox. Now, 20th Century Fox, they sort of glammed her up, and they turned her hair blonde, and they reduced some of her widow peak, and they did the glam makeup of the time on her. And yet they didn't really have work for her. She did a couple of walk-on parts and some publicity things, and after the year was over with the contract, they let her go. So she didn't just give up on herself. She decided to get her hustle on, is what she did. And so any place they needed a blonde to cut a ribbon or open up a store, she was right there. And it wasn't long before another studio saw her, and it was Columbia Studios. And she got with Columbia Studios, and she still wasn't working as much as they had wanted her to, or that she thought she was going to do. She did a couple of walk-on parts, but they didn't have a whole line of work for her. Now, during the time between 20th Century Fox and Columbia, and while she was at Columbia, she started really getting serious about her acting, because she really wanted to be able to do some professional work and some dramatic work and some comedy, but she really needed to help. She had to learn how to act. Now, she ended up being a really popular pinup girl for the Korean War. She made a particular calendar that really helped launch Playboy magazine when she's in the swimsuit calendar, and that made her really big. So it ended up that she left Columbia, or Columbia left her, because they didn't have the work for her. But it wasn't long with all her self-promoting that once again she got back with 20th Century Fox. And then 20th Century Fox hired her back because that calendar was so huge. And the guys that were in the Korean War were going crazy over her. And they wanted her to be in movies. So in 1957, 1952, her first movie was Niagara with Joseph Cotton. And that movie was a bigger hit than she thought it was going to be. So right away, 20th Century Fox put her in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes with Jane Russell. And that was also started in 1952, being filmed. And she also got her handprints and her fingerprints along with Jane Russell in front of Grauman's. Now, in 1954, she met Joe DiMaggio, who was a very famous baseball player at that time. And it was sort of love at first sight, or maybe it was lust at first sight, really. But they ended up getting married. And I'm going to tell you something. Marilyn was extremely happy because Joe, being Italian, had a huge family. And that was like Marilyn's dream, to be a part of a huge family. And she was so excited about doing that. But then that never really happened because her fame was so huge, it was outshining Joe's. And so, in fact, on their honeymoon, they went to Japan for some publicity shots, and the Japanese citizens were just crazy about her, as well as here in the United States. In fact, while she was on her honeymoon, she flew from Japan. She left Joe there in Japan, and she went to Korea. And she did like 10 shows in Korea for the Korean soldiers. She went to the hospitals for the American injured military men to take pictures and things like that. So she just got really popular. Now, in the summer, or I should say in 1954, actually, she got so popular that there was an award, and it was for a magazine called Photoplay. And she won the most popular and most photogenic actress in the world and won an award for that. Now, in the summer of 1954, she goes to New York and she's going to make another movie. And this year, it's The 7-Year Itch. And I know you remember this movie because this is when she has that beautiful white halter dress and with the pleated skirt, the bottom part. And she's standing on a subway grate, and the subway goes by and it raises the skirt up. Well, at this time, when Joe saw that, oh man, was he furious. He didn't want his wife to show everything. Now, she had on a double pair of undies, and she did not have stockings on. It was her bare legs. It was summer, but he still was bothered by that. And it turned out that it was like 4,000 people came out to see her do that. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. So they were very excited to be there. Ultimately, that marriage came to an end. It was over before it started. It only lasted 10 months. And Joe just was very jealous and insecure of his wife, and he couldn't take it anymore. So in addition to the marriage breaking up, now Marilyn decides, I want to leave Fox because I want to have more creative control of what I'm doing. I want to get paid more. They were just utilizing her in comedies, and she wanted to do more than comedies. She wanted to do dramatic roles as well, and they were not allowing her to do that. So she left 20th Century Fox, and she goes to New York, and she starts her own film company. That way, she can have the type of roles that she wants. She can make her own movies. Well, that worked for a little bit, but it wasn't long before Hollywood came calling again. And now this was 1956, and Fox, seeing all the publicity around her when she was in New York, and she couldn't go anywhere without being mobbed, and we call them paparazzis now here in the States, but they were just mobbing her. And so that sort of twisted the arm of Fox in 1956 to bring her back and make another movie. And she made the movie Bus Stop at that time. Now, at that time, after she made the movie Bus Stop, she met the playwright Arthur Miller. And they fell in love automatically, or pretty quickly anyways, and they got married. Now, with this particular marriage, this was another husband that was possessive, jealous, and she loved him, and she really wanted to have children with him. The problem was that she got pregnant a couple of times and then they miscarried. And this was during the time that it was like the Red Scare, and they were trying to say her husband was a communist because of the playwrights he wrote, but it was found to be untrue. So it was a lot of stress on Marilyn at that time. But in 1958, she made another movie with Billy Wilder, and she had, and that's the movie with, I think it's Some Like It Hot. That's the name of the movie with Tony Curtis that she made, and it was a Billy Wilder film, and she loved Billy Wilder. She loved working with him, but it was back to the comedies again. She's always having to play this sort of numbskull person, which she wasn't that at all. At the time when she was making that movie, she had she was like double clutch with two people. On one side was Paula Strasberg, and that was her acting coach. And Marilyn wouldn't do anything unless she asked Paula first. And for that, and it's been said anyways, that some of the actors on that particular Some Like It Hot were really disturbed because they felt like, just come on and do the lines. And Marilyn had gotten so dependent on Paula that she couldn't do one line, nothing, unless Paula approved it and said it was okay. On the other arm, she had her husband, Arthur Miller, and he wanted complete control of her as well, and he felt that Paula was smothering her, but all the while, him not realizing he was smothering her too. Now, by 1960, the marriage was in trouble. It got to be just too much, and too much for Marilyn as well. At this time, Miller writes a play, and it's called The Misfits, and it's been agreed to make it into a movie with her and Clark Gable and a few other stars, Montgomery Clift, and it was about a woman who was losing control of herself mentally, emotionally, and I guess that movie was really, she was going through it, but she was hurt at the same time. And that movie was sort of like written by Arthur Miller, as like a revenge type of act, because he wasn't getting the love and attention he needed. He felt that she wasn't mentally stable as she could be. And instead of trying to take care of her, he worked to exploit her. Well, during the filming of the movie, she ended up getting so unnerved and so emotional that she had a complete collapse, and she had to be taken off the film, and the film was shut down for a while, and it delayed filming, which cost Hollywood a lot of money. The actors were upset, director was upset, but she started depending on pills and drinking. And once the movie was over, the marriage went as well. So now we have Marilyn at her most vulnerable. She's drinking, she's gaining weight, her looks are fading in Hollywood standards. To us, she looked fine, but to Hollywood, she was fading. That youthful glow had gone off of her. She'd gotten hospitalized another time, and they were trying to their way of rehabbing her, and she wouldn't really stick with it. And so much so that even Joe DiMaggio, her first husband, came and got her out of a hospital. So then in 1962, she was really fragile at that time. But 20th Century Fox offered her a movie, which she took, and it was called Something's Gotta Give, and it was going to be a movie with Dean Martin. And if you look on YouTube, you can see some outtakes of her swimming in a pool with that. But it got so much to her. The director was really driving her hard, and she was already tense and stressed, and she was drinking, and Dean Martin was drinking, and she was taking pills, to go to sleep and to wake up, and the thing they did in Hollywood so much that day, that sometimes she couldn't come in to film. she would be very depressed, or she didn't get rest, and she wouldn't show up. So much so that 20th Century Fox decided that they were not pampering her anymore, and they threatened to fire her, but she did not take that threat seriously. So much so that she flew to Washington, D.C. at that time to sing Happy Birthday to John F. Kennedy, if everybody remembers that. At this time also, she was seeing the Kennedys. She was seeing John for a while. And then John was, I'm just going to say it plain, he was kind of over her because she was really in need of something that John couldn't fulfill because he had a whole wife and family. So he sort of passed her over to Robert, and Robert would take the calls, and then they started a relationship. But in the end, she had her birthday on June 1st. She had turned 36. Her depression was getting more and more. She'd gotten fired off the film because she wasn't supposed to have left, and she had said that she was sick and all that, but that wasn't the truth at all. So she got fired, and she was really bummed out about it, but she was still hopeful. There were still some things coming down the pipe for her, so she was excited and very helpful and hopeful. Ultimately, on August 5th, 1962, she was found dead. Next to her bed were pill bottles and alcohol bottles. That night before she expired, there were even some actors that said that she had called them to have long conversations with them. They couldn't really talk. They weren't in, there was a gathering going on, and she wasn't, I don't know if she wasn't invited, but she didn't go to that, and she was at home, and that's how they found her laying face down in bed that early evenings, early in the mornings, like midnight or so. Her doctor, Dr. Green was his name, who was not a physical doctor, he's actually a psychiatrist, was called by the housekeeper. Now, they didn't call the police. The housekeeper called Dr. Green. Then Dr. Green, in turn, called the studio. And finally, about 4 hours later, they called the police to let them know that she had passed. So now I want to know, what happened to Marilyn Monroe? Is this a suicide? Some say she was murdered because she was dealing with the Kennedys. Some say it was the Dr. Green that injected her with something. But let's take a look. And I'm back. I just wanted to sage my room and sage the cards a little bit. And so let's take a look at Marilyn. So, first of all, her birthday was June 1st, 1926. And if we look at 1962, 6, 7, 8, that was a number 9 year. So that's interesting because the number 9 year is about endings and finalities and going away. And so this happened in a number 9 year, and her birthday starts her personal year. The whole universal year was a 9. Her personal year was a 7. So with her personal year being a 7, she did everything that she wasn't supposed to do. That's the year that you're supposed to be working on self. That's the year that you're supposed to sit still, be quiet, take some classes, spiritual classes. Go to a church if that's what you like. Do some yoga. Take care of your body. Take care of your mind. Put down the alcohol. Put down the pills. Get in touch with self. That's what you're supposed to be doing. The universe slows you down on purpose because it's time for you to slow down, get yourself together, reflect on yourself, learn to accept yourself by yourself. Not accept yourself because your fans love you or because some guy loves you or your friends love you. Love you for you. That's the number 7 year. Why? It's preparing you for the big blow up you're going to have next year. And she did not know that. She lost her job in June. Okay. And so that was the start of her number 7 year. Hers is the first. She lost the job later on in June. And so with that being the case, it kicked in that number 7 year on the 1st. And right away, she started hitting obstacles and challenges and not understanding why. Not understanding. She felt like she was unloved. She felt rejected. You got to think about her as someone who was abandoned basically by her mom. Her mother was in and out of her life. Let me get me some Bubba here. Her mother was in and out of her life, but she was with foster care more than anything else. And so she was living in a life of constant change and constant chaos. So that number 7 year hitting her, where she come from, she just came the last 4 years or so, just blowing up like crazy. She couldn't understand it. She didn't realize that what she had to do was really work on self so she could transform and take her career to a higher place, because that's where it was going to go. Her number 6 tells me that she had a lot of responsibility. When these people adopted her or fostered her, she probably was doing the cleaning around the house and taking care of them and herself and her mom. That number 1 says that she was going to have to be a person that wasn't going to be in a traditional relationship. Even though she was married, the spotlight was always on her. The focus was on her. So she didn't understand that she was going to have a life of independence, because that's what it ended up being for her. Now, the 1926 part, she didn't really get into that. Now, her life path is also a 7. So that tells me that this lady was really smart. And I see that playing out. She has Gemini in Mercury, and that's the genius spot. That's what I call it, because Mercury is Gemini's planet. They're married together. And so when you have them together like that, that is complete simpatico. So she was playing a role of the dumb blonde, the buxom blonde, the tight, super tight dresses. All of that was acting for her. That wasn't her real self. But she was smart enough with that number 7 to understand that. And she was a 7 person where she was focusing on her craft. Her acting meant everything to her. I mean, it literally meant everything to her. And she spent a great deal of time with acting coaches and going to acting schools in New York and stuff like that, really taking it serious. And having to just be able to be pigeonholed in this sex symbol, it was a win-loss for her. On one hand, she liked the attention, she liked the glamour, she liked the money, she liked the fame. But on the other hand, there's more to me than that. She was a true Gemini. One side of her was a true sex symbol. The other side of her was very serious. She had a rising in Virgo, so that meant that she did take her craft very seriously. She paid attention to the details of stuff. She was very analytical. She knew a good script from a bad script, but they didn't trust her. And that wasn't so much because it was her, but partly it was, but it was because of the times that women didn't have that kind of a voice. And then her moon is in Aquarius, so that made her very open to anything. She would have loved this. She would have loved to have a reading, numerology, tarot, horoscopes, astrology. I'm sure she dabbled in all of that. She absolutely believed in all of that. She had a Mars in Pisces, and that tells me that she could be deceitful. And I guess she was when she was trying to play the sex kitten when she really wasn't that person. She could be shy, very much in love with the arts, but also, a dreaminess. When she got mad, she would go into her own world. She would make up her own type of world. She also had a Saturn in Scorpio. That Saturn in Scorpio is, kind of a tough placement, because that's going to make her very much someone that is going to be a detective. And they're going to want to look below the surface. And they're going to be very big on holding things in or holding things back or not revealing all their emotions and disappointments and their hurts. And when you're keeping all that inside, that's just eating away at your spirit. That's what was happening with her. And I'm going to take a look at the guys, both Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller. And I saw they were almost like the same guy. They both had Mercury in Scorpio. They were 2 different sun signs. One was a Libra, one was a Sagittarius. But they had similar Saturns in Cancer. They had, like I said, the Mercury's in Scorpio. They had the Sagittarius in there. Arthur Miller had a Mars in Leo. And so that made him possessive. That was like kind of the worst for him. It made him very insecure, very possessive. Same thing with Saturn and Cancer for both these men. They needed constant attention, constant praise, constant approval, and yet they married the biggest star in the world, and it looks like they're clinging on to her for fame when they were famous in their own right. But being with her, her light outshined everybody's light. And so there was no way that you were going to have this great adulation for either one of these gentlemen, period. And so that made the relationships with these guys especially difficult because she couldn't find peace. That Mars and Leo of Arthur Miller, I'm telling you, I could feel his spirit, so help me. He was a person that was very condescending towards her, harsh towards her, arrogant, this I'm better than you type of thing. When he felt insecure, he felt unloved, very spying on her and all of this. Both of these men both seem to be very sexually driven. So she was sort of the man's fantasy, and especially for these type of men who had a lot of that testosterone and wanted to do that, but she wasn't really that. They couldn't understand that was the act and that was not her. And then Joe DiMaggio, he's got a sun in Sagittarius, he got a Venus in Sagittarius, and right away I know that he was similar in the same way as Arthur Miller. That harsh talk, that blunt talk, that telling it like it is in a way that is not kind but nasty. And that is enough to drive you crazy. But he could be there for her ultimately. And he was. So now I just want to look and see. Did you overdose, Marilyn? I want to know, was this overdose or accident? Okay, it's kind of both. It's kind of both. And what I mean by that is it was sort of like I took this, I forgot I took that, I forgot I took this, I'm having a drink, I'm feeling good. I don't care. Whatever happens, happens. For the moment. Let me see. Yeah, that would have been her, the Queen of Cups. Very, first of all, very insightful, far-seeing, intuitive. She knew where her career was going and where it wasn't going to go. She wasn't going to be the grande dame of the theater, which she had imagined for herself to be. Her roles as the sex kitten were going to fall off, and she knew that. But she was very emotional. So much so where she could even, like feel sorry for herself. Dreamy, nice, warm person, really. Loving, generous person, giving too much of herself and not getting enough. Holding her own, even in tough times. When you lose your job, I don't care who you are, you got to hold on. You got to find a way to hold on. You got to have money. You got to live. And she was trying to hold on. She was planning, though. If you see this queen, she's looking into this cup. She's planning down the road, like what's my next thing. She wasn't suicidal per se. Now, unfortunately, I have the Star card, which is one of the very best cards. It's in reverse. And here you're feeling stuck. You've given up hope. You don't know which way to turn. You feel lost. Nothing can appease you. You're lost in your emotions. So here we are again, two emotions. She's lost in her emotions. And then we have the Two of Swords. This is tough decisions. Tough decisions. What's my next move? She didn't know what her next move was going to be. There was some things in the works, but she had not made any decision on what her next move was going to be. It was just she was sitting there and it was stagnating. She was overwhelmed with emotions, having been fired. Her relationships are broken up. Her husband left her again. And yeah. And then that's her immaturity. That Page of Swords telling me that she had immature thoughts and immature actions, and she took action without really thinking it through, with feeling lost and confused and not knowing what's going on. people try to say someone came in and someone killed her. That's not what happened at all. It was a moment of loss of hope, loss of faith. It was just a moment. And at the time when that moment happened, it was no turning back. It was like, I think I took one pill. Did I take 2 pills? Did I take 3? I don't even care, whatever. And then when it's too late and you start drifting off, it's too late. And that is what happened to her. No one murdered her. No one injected anything in her. She had taken these pills over a course of time, because sometimes they say that they didn't dissolve in her stomach and all of this. It was by her own hand. This was not a planned situation. It was just a thing to do. It was an impulsive. It was overburdened with so many things. And she had the judgment card on her that said, you know what? I think I'm just over it. I'm over this whole Hollywood. I'm over everything. And then that's that. So what happened to Marilyn? Marilyn took her own life. I want to say that it was 100% an accident, but it wasn't. It was accident suicide. Accident suicide. It wasn't, I'm going to go in here and kill myself. It wasn't that. It was, I'm reaching out. I need someone to talk to. I'm feeling alone. I'm feeling bad. Where are my friends? Where this and that? Let me take another pill. I'm talking. I'm distracted. Whatever. It's whatever. And then that is what happens to her. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. What do you think happened to Marilyn? Have a great day.